trying to cast this over to my YouTube channel at the same time.
Okay.
The YouTube channel opens up and I got to close the window and oh, there's just so much dancing going on.
I'm loving it.
Yeah. So, all right. I think
Custom live streaming.
Oh, it's so exciting.
It is.
Exciting. So happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. I don't have any green beer, but I might later.
Well, I don't have any green. I'm a terrible Canadian. I don't drink beer, but maybe I'll have a wee glass of wine. But
that's a good idea.
What I drank in Ireland was I had, I think it was Bulmers. I drank apple cider.
Oh, yeah, I like apple cider.
Yeah, I drank that, and that, I still got significant hangovers, but.
Awesome.
It was a lot of fun, So welcome everybody to, this is my third week, and I'm so excited to talk with Gregg Brown. So I'm just going to give you my little spiel on Gregg. And so, well, if anybody doesn't know me, which you probably do, but then there's a few people that have signed up that have been friends of yours, Gregg. So some people maybe not.
I do see some people in our lovely chat here.
Yes, Miss Amy's waving hello.
Hi, Amy.
From last week, Miss Amy. So I'm Leslie Hughes. I am the principal of Punch Media, and I'm a LinkedIn optimization specialist. And I started this weekly chat because I have the most amazing friends that I can invite to come on and chat about all sorts of different topics. And so when Gregg, I guess maybe when you saw Gregg, when you saw Amy and I speak, you were like, I'm willing to speak, and I jumped at the chance because you're an international keynote speaker, author. So I'm just going to read off all of your comments. So Gregg speaks about influencing, navigating the future of work. He's spoken to CEOs and frontline workers, associations, governments, Fortune 500 companies, and audiences from the UN, NATO, World Bank, even prisoners and nuns, which I'm going to want to know a little bit more about, I think.
Ask away.
So you're passionate about helping people, increasing their impact, creating positive change, and making a difference in the world. Me too. And you've overseen large-scale, multi-million-dollar change initiatives. You've guest lectured at many universities, and you have been on the certain media like Entrepreneur, Thrive Global, on the social like me. You got to meet all the lovely ladies of the social. And Amy and I went to high school with Marcy Ian, go Lancers. So, you know, Amy and I always have to throw that in there too.
She's also our member of parliament now, too.
She is. She's very fancy and was always destined for success. She's a smart cookie. You've been on Global News, and you were referred to as the Fixer by News Talk 1010 iHeartRadio.
The Fixer.
The Fixer. And as if you don't have enough going on, you not only have one book, which I have.
Thank you.
You now have the second one.
Yeah, my second one's back there, the top 10 change hacks. Yeah.
And this one is Ready, Set, Change Again.
Thank you. I'm doing working on my third one now, which is all about getting through the pandemic and coming out the other end. And I've interviewed a bunch of leaders, and I'm really excited to talk and write about that when I sit down and start writing.
Well, I think, you know, that's so interesting because that was one of the things that I was going to ask you about, because if you're, you know, this expert in change, we've all had to go through change this year. I mean, this has been quite the year where, like it or not, change is happening and change again, right? So yeah. I guess as we're sort of transitioning, I've got so much to ask you about, but, you know, I guess that's the first thing to talk about is like, how are people sort of navigating through this change? Like, are you finding that people are having a tough time with it, or are people sort of adjusting? What do you think?
Well, you know, like many people, my calendar cleared last March. I think it was March 10th. Also, my calendar got wiped out, and I sort of sat there for 2 weeks stunned, as many other people did. And, you know, then clients started asking me to do sessions about, you know, working virtually and navigating the uncertainty that was going on at the time. And what we were talking about at that time is much different than what we're talking about today when I'm doing sessions. You know, I'm still doing everything virtually and speaking virtually, yet the conversation's different. You know, back then it was all about, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know how to handle this. Now the conversation is much more, okay, how am I going to look at my future of work? How am I going to navigate a potential hybrid model with myself and my team? what about all of the industries, including the one I'm a part of, the speaking and events industries, and I know Amy is as well, that, have really been decimated and gone through difficulties this year. And many, have rebounded and are coming back. So the conversation's very different today. I think it's much more about how do I prepare myself to navigate the future versus how do I deal with the stuff going on now. Everyone on the planet, and this is sort of what is the good thing about this, a year later, every single person on the planet has a new set of what I would call change muscles that, help us navigate change. And, all of us have new ones. And, whether I've been talking with people at the UN or NATO or, with the admin professionals conference or Amy's groups or, any of the ones you're a part of, back then it was all about, how do I handle it? Now it's all about, okay, what do I do going forward? So it's much more proactive, I think, the conversation. I think it's much more about, I'm good at navigating kids and work and cats and dogs and, everything in my home. How do I prepare going forward and then going forward again and going forward again? And, we're not going to get to a new normal. It's going to be a new normal 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. This isn't going to end just because everybody gets inoculated,
That's too bad. I kind of wanted everything to go back.
I know, me too. And that's the thing. I hate change.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I hate change. And every single person listening hates change that has a negative impact on them.
Right.
There's not one person on the planet who's like, oh, I love change that's going to make me unemployed, or I love change that's going to wreck my life or hurt my kids or burn my house down. So when people say to me, and I hear this a lot, oh, I'm change ready, I love change. I'm like, we all love change that's good for us or that we initiate.
That's true, but not when it's forced upon us.
No. There's not one person on the planet back in March who's like, yay, there's a pandemic. I'm so excited. I can't wait to not work and lose my job and have my kids be afraid to go to school and have my parents get COVID. Nobody did that.
Right. Nobody wished that upon anybody, for sure.
No. And yet the good thing is we all have that new set of change muscles. So if another pandemic happened, guess what? We're going to handle it better.
Yes. I think are a little bit more I think the introverts have been saying oh, I'm this, being separated from everybody I've been practicing this for years. So from an introvert perspective, I think they've been a little bit more acclimatized because this is their wheelhouse. But for people like you and I who want to get out and see people, we're like, get me out of the house. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, if about extroversion and introversion, it's really about that's sort of the personality type without labeling and pigeonholing anybody that might be a predominant, characteristic for themselves. Yet the reality is this: if they were impacted negatively by the pandemic, it doesn't matter if you're an extrovert, introvert, or whatever, and it's a scale, right? So it's not black and white. Nobody's a real introvert. Your scale. Mm-hmm. People think, for example, because I'm a raging extrovert, I'm really great at parties. Well, most parties and events I go to, I will often stand in the corner unless I know people. I'm not that, let's go meet people. Unless I'm paid to be there or it's an event that I have to be at, then I'll get out and mingle. But I'm not a natural networker.
I'm with you too, and I think that surprises a lot of people. Mm-hmm. That I hate networking too. To your point, mm-hmm. Unless I'm invited to speak, I'm like, I can't be bothered. Yet I'm always the last person to leave too. So I'm like, I want to do the Irish goodbye and just disappear.
Oh yeah.
But I never do. I always find somebody's story fascinating, and I'm like the last person. They're hooking me out. Come on, Leslie, go. Let's get out of here. So.
I love that.
So when it comes to change, do you think it's fear? Isn't it the underlying sort of issue is fear? Is that why people don't like change?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. I think it's not so much about being afraid. I think it's about fear of the unknown. So this is the reality. We all want to predict the future. Every single person on the planet wants to know what's going on. That's why we, go to tarot card readers and do tarot cards and do strategic plans and project plans and change management plans. Those are like the tarot cards of business. They tell us what the future holds. And guess what? When the future doesn't match what we're expecting, when it, like, if it matches, great. We're like, yay, this is happening the way I predicted. But when there's a gap where it's like, this is what I expected to happen and this didn't, then we've got a problem. And that's where, so if it's something small, like your kid's not coming home from work, from school for dinner at 6, if they're like, it's 6:30, they haven't showed up, there's a disconnect. So you get upset or something happens to try to get alignment. We're always trying to seek that alignment between what we're expecting and what we're seeing. And when we don't see that, that's when that fear of the unknown happens, stepping out of our comfort zone, all of that stuff impacts our ability to step into change. All of us can step into difficult change if we can predict it. So, and if we've initiated it. So if you leave your job to go to another job and you've initiated that, that's a much better than experience than if I fired you from that job.
Yeah,
The process is the same.
Yeah, no, you're 100%.
You still go through the loss of leaving your job, saying goodbye to people, leaving stuff that you love doing, going stuff to something else that you don't know what you're doing yet. And then you get to your new job, like, oh my God, I hate it. You know, whatever. You go through that process. But how you react and respond is based upon whether you initiate that or whether someone else does.
That's so cool. I never, but you're giving me an aha. And that's
Good. That's why I'm here, hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's so cool because you're right. I mean, I deal a lot with people, writing LinkedIn profiles and helping people. That's a big part of it, right? Is oftentimes people are either thinking about career transition or they are in career transition, which a lot of people have gone through. And it has really been challenging. And I know it's kind of, I think of it like dating. It's kind of like when you have someone in your life, it's a lot easier. Everyone wants to date you. And then as soon as you're single, you got the plague, right? And nobody wants to go out. And that's what it sort of feels like from.
Well, it depends if it's a Friday night or not.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So talking about LinkedIn, I have given you some questions ahead of time just to sort of,
yes.
So we had something to talk about. And, one of the things that I see over and over again, and I think I might have asked you this before, but it hasn't really stuck in my head, is so many people are afraid of LinkedIn. They don't want to use LinkedIn because they're afraid of putting their professional selves out there. I think the channels like Instagram and Facebook, and they're the fun channels where the community that you're hanging out with are more forgiving, I think, if you make a faux pas or you goof up. But on LinkedIn specifically, the change, not really change, but putting yourself out there from a professional perspective can really be a huge fear there. So how would you advise people so that they would take action and make change on like a professional network like LinkedIn?
Well, so this is why I think that fear's there. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, there's no accountability attached to it. And it's not attached to your livelihood, which if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that good old triangle a lot of us talked about in first year college or university, when you're dealing with LinkedIn, you're talking about your employment and my ability to pay my rent and pay my mortgage. So I think there's a natural fear that if I put stuff out, is it going to impact me and make me look stupid because this is my job? Yeah. So I think it's natural. I think that I think people have to take a baby step and take a bigger picture view and start to think of themselves as their own small business.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone is an entrepreneur, and I know you talk about this. So whether you're an admin assistant, in the government, whether you are, the head of talent in a big for-profit organization, or the head of IT, or the head of the change management office, whatever, LinkedIn is there, for us to showcase in a way that's appropriate. Who we are and what we think and what we do, and to take a point of view. LinkedIn is the number one, I was just reading this the other day, the number one way people get jobs now. And I can tell you, someone who has their own business and, gets paid to speak, on virtual stages now, but, usually on a real big, hard stage, I can stand on and engage with people physically is meaning in person, is that my buyers are there, the heads of talent are there, the heads of HR, whether they're with Chorus or whether with the government or wherever, everybody's there.
And you see their faces and you can see whether they're getting your point. You're getting
and you cannot lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing with resumes. Some research is out recently that's 50% of people still, and I'm very clear that, LinkedIn makes you honest, and like I'll give you an example. Like years ago, I was speaking at a conference and the organizer, and it's not the person who's on our call with us, an organizer decided to rejig my introduction to make it sound good. And they wrote, Gregg led the team that opened the first wave of Starbucks in Canada. Well, that's not even remotely true. I was a part of the team. I was one of the lowly team members that was a part of the team that opened the first wave. And those little pieces of language, I'm all about, you must be 100% authentic. Did I win an award for this or for this? And so it's all about not taking things out of context. And what I tell people about LinkedIn is this, and I tell them this about anything they're worried about. Worries are just made up stories. They're made up stories. They're not risks. Risks are what could happen, what can I do to prevent it from happening, what do I do if it does happen? It's asking more questions about that. So if you have a risk about going like I'm worried I'm going to look stupid, well, what can you do to prevent that from happening? Well, I'll get someone like you to read my profile. I'll get one of my friends to edit what I post just for the few ones so I don't look like an idiot. I'll research what other people write to get a tone and language. But if you just sit there going, oh, I'm so worried, worries leave you stuck. And they're made up stories. So make up better stories. Use those neurons in your prefrontal cortex of your brain to make up good stories. This is going to be a good day. My conference speech is going to go well. Our conversation on our podcast will go well. My people will like what I post on LinkedIn. Change the story. If it's just made up. So make up a good one.
Well, and I think so much of what you talk about, and I've seen your book too, and we haven't had this conversation, but it's so NLP based. Like there's so.
It is. There's NLP, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Psychology, right?
I've taken a few levels of NLP, and so the one sort of thing in NLP is there is no failure. There's only feedback. That when people say fail, 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 well, I look at it, I just reframe it. And I'm still afraid, just like everybody else. I was just speaking on Clubhouse, like before you and I got on, I was asked to speak on Clubhouse. And I was just saying, like, I've been, even being on TV, being on the radio, putting a book out there, doing public speaking, I'm still terrified of putting myself out there. And, even having, even when you go on, like you and I did, not together, but separately on the social, I'm still nervous about pitching them a bit of a different story in case they say no. And so I think, it doesn't,
right.
Gregg, by this time, by 50, I thought I would have this all figured out.
No, like,
it doesn't go away.
No, I don't think it does go away. And I think, for the people that are listening to the podcast, it's really, that thing that goes on in your gut or your head or your heart, and it's different in people, that gives you that anxiety. It's all about how you interpret that. Is it, I always think a little bit of anxiousness when you get on stage or when you get on a podcast is good because you can channel that energy. And I like, when I first started speaking many years ago, someone said to me, just flip that switch from anxiety to excitement. It's the same feeling in your body. It's the energy coursing through your body. So channel it in a good way.
No, absolutely. 100%. That's what Amy and I were talking about last week too. So actually, I haven't given you these, so some of them are just you and I having a conversation. So how?
I'm used to it. Thank you.
How did you go? And this sort of like segues into what Amy and I were even talking about last week. And so far as you've been a breakout speaker, and now you also do keynote speaking, international keynote speaking. So how did you ladder up? Because that's a different, I've done a little bit of keynote speaking. It's a different experience altogether. So how did you change that? How did you go from workshopping into storytelling?
So I think that's the conversation. It's about going from the workshops to the stage. And so there's a couple of pieces about that I think are important. One is I thought I had to change everything that made me a good workshop leader to be a good stage speaker, because every book basically says that. So, what I had to do, and it was an evolution, it didn't happen overnight, was think about what makes me really good in person in a workshop, or whether it's a large and small workshop where people are actually doing group work and stuff, you're leading people down an educational path, versus being on stage where you're creating a story and an experience for people. You're still educating, because I don't have that. I climbed Mount Everest and I won this Olympic medal, and I'm always jealous of the people who get those standing ovations. I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't quite do that, but I showed up at work and didn't kill my boss one day, so that's a good thing. And that's most of us on the planet. So I used to think, that I had to be this really big speaker with these big stories. And then what really resonated with people on the big stage and the small stage were the little stories that I told that were about my day-to-day life that they experience as well. And those are the stories that people write, oh my gosh, I do that too. I'm going to learn how to do it differently. Or this is what happens to me. Oh, thank you for sharing that you're not perfect. So it's those, so that transition, it was an evolution. And yet I also had to get better at, and I'm not great, I mean, I'm good, but I don't think I'm great, is that it's going to be another 10 years till I would say I might be great. Like, I was a great workshop facilitator, but I started as, I don't say that with ego, just because I'd had 25, 30 years experience. And then I became very novice, was like, ah. And, it was thanks to the lovely Amy Riddell, who's on here, that she gave me this opportunity to speak consistently and do keynotes that evolved. I think I did 12 for her in a year or year and a half, that really honed my teeth, that, gave me the skill to hold an audience, of whether it was 1,000 here in Toronto or, 500 somewhere else, and guide them through a process and give them practical tips to help them. So what I tell people is, how do I do it? I practiced the crap out of it. I got up and spoke anytime I could.
Yeah. And getting out of your own way, right? I mean, I think that's part of it too. I think the first time I spoke, I was so terrified because I was thinking, everyone's going to judge me. Everyone's going to,
Well, they do. They will.
And they, well, absolutely. I mean, I was saying to Amy that I get those feedback forms, right? And people are like, oh, great tips. She speaks a little fast. And then one person wrote, she seemed a little manic. And I was like, oh, yeah, but I mean, that's who I am. And I do speak fast, and I do come with a lot of energy, and I do try to have a big presence, but that's what makes me me, right?
Well, I think the thing is this, I've had to learn, because I have high energy like you, I've had to learn on stage to slow down when it's important so people listen.
That's hard for me.
Yeah, and it's a skill, to slow down so people listen. And it took me time to practice that. And so I finally got into a cadence where I could talk like this, and then be like, at the end of the story, this is the point. And people will listen to you, because so there's also the speaking skills, are the varying the tone, the where to block yourself on stage, how to not talk and use a bunch of slides, how to structure a story, and those are the skill that you can learn. And then there's the other stuff where I sort of came full circle and realized I took out all the stuff that made me me. And now that I put all that back in, it just elevates you even more. And I don't want anybody thinking that I think I'm the best speaker on the planet, because I am not. I like to think after 10 years, I'm good. And I like to think that. And I strive every time I speak to be better. And, and it's the same leading a workshop. I've led workshops for 25, 30 years. I'm for 30 years, I'm not embarrassed. I'm actually proud to be old. But I've led, and I'm a good workshop facilitator. I can facilitate almost anything. If my content's good, if I have crappy content, I cannot make it sing.
So how, just for your advice to me, and we talked about this before, because I think, with my workshops, I can sing and dance and tap dance all around the whole point of LinkedIn, and people go, oh, this is great, thank you so much. And then especially if I'm working with a particular client, I go back and I look at some of their team's profiles. They haven't made a damn bit of change on their profile. So what would be your advice to me to get, as a workshop leader, to get people to actually, okay, so now it's time to do it without, taking time away from their day, because most of the time they just want me to get the hell out of there.
I would get them to do, you know what? Every session I've done, and if you've been to my keynotes or any of them, it doesn't matter if it's a workshop or a keynote or a webinar, I always say, I want them to work on something that they're currently doing in the class. So I would actually get them to do the first paragraph in the class and start it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I would make them do it right in class. Take the first paragraph out of your profile, bam, and rewrite it.
Yeah.
And take 2 minutes to do it and pair them up to do something. Because there has to be that commitment to do it. So when I do whether it's an influencing or a change leadership workshop or something that's not like a keynote, I have them bring in a real world situation. And if you don't have a real world situation, there's no point in you being in the workshop.
Yeah. And the one thing that I say this over and over again now, because it completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
What would be a good exercise maybe for me now that you've said that, because it just gave me another aha, was pairing them up. And the thing that I say all the time is when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so pairing them up to say, okay, so you work with so-and-so, you tell them what you have, what their skill sets are, what value do they bring? I think that would be really helpful, I think.
Yes, I was just coaching a speaker the other day because I mentor young entrepreneurs just as a pro bono thing because I like to give back. And it's a young guy in his 20s who he's a speaker and has his website. Shows me his website, excuse me, and I have no idea what he speaks on. And I said, I have no idea what you speak. It says you're a speaker. I said, I have no idea what you do. Yeah. And you explained it to me, and I still have no idea what you do. So you're right. Get out of that jar. Yeah, you got to get out. And I'm great at helping other people with their resume, but I need help with mine.
Yeah, same thing. I know I could probably use to hire somebody to do mine because I think I'm a good writer, but I am inside that jar, so I don't necessarily see the value. So
absolutely.
And I think it's something we all still struggle with. As I said, standing in your value and telling your story is only, I think to your point, and I was watching one of your videos, I think when you were on the social, in fact, this morning and you were talking about taking those baby steps. I think that helps a lot. It's like taking some sort of initiative to make the change, because the first time I wrote on my LinkedIn profile that CBC called me a social media guru, I was like, oh, people are going to think I'm so full of myself. And then when my friend Anita, who's my friend and mentor that used to work at LinkedIn, she was like, girl, you got to put that on everything. Now when people go, is this CBC social media guru? I'm like, you bet your sweet bottom it is.
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, it is. Because now I just know, if someone's going to judge me, I think about the man in the arena, that, if they're not in there with blood, sweat, and tears in the arena fighting the good fight, then they can shut up. Not everybody's going to like me, and I don't like that not everybody likes me.
I know.
But I'm getting better with it. I'm getting better with people think I do sound shrill. When I listen to myself, I sound shrill. But I give a crap. That's, that's my
we all want people to like us. Nobody wants to deal with negativity. And I've said it for years I used to teach a presentation skills course for many, many years. And I would say, 10% of the people are not going to like it because you don't have hair, you have hair because you're a girl or a boy, you got blue eyes or dark hair, whatever, doesn't matter. And, you still get that one bad evaluation that I remember from 1997, and so you're right, it is hard to get through that. I think the best thing, the reason many times people get stuck and are afraid to step into the future of how they're going to navigate their work or their life because they want it all figured out. Because like I said earlier with change, we want to predict the future. So I'm going to do my strategic plan for my life and wait till all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before I take action. If you wait till all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed, you will never take action. So the trick is you want to take there's an analogy I use, and when I was a kid, I was a big Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, and sometimes I show this in my keynotes of the video where he's done all his calculated thinking to get to that darn holy grail. I don't know if I can say darn and holy grail in the same sentence, but I did. And he's done all the calculations. So it's not a risky step. So I'm not talking about jumping off a cliff. So he's done his calculations, he's put the treasure map together, he's done all his thinking, and he's at the edge of the abyss, and he has to step across the abyss, the cavern, to get to the other side. And he's like, everything says that if I put my foot out, the ground will appear. So you have to take a calculated risk and put that foot out and take that action. And as you take that action, the other steps start to appear. And when I'm coaching entrepreneurs, you know, we get a plan, but I tell them, you might end up over here, and that's okay. But we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's either in your book or what you spoke about is just that we, you know, the small decisions that we do make these, it's almost like those sliding door moments or the butterfly effect or whatever. It's like these small decisions that we make can change things, and oftentimes, even if it's through adversity, it's for the good, because you always learn something. It's interesting, as I'm happily divorced 8 years, that, you know, when I was going through it, I was not happy one little bit.
No.
But having come through it and been on the other side of it, so many people that I know that were in an unhappy situation and they moved forward from it have built that resilience. And so that's kind of what you're talking about with work too, is building resilience at work, right?
Well, it's about, and it's about timing too, right? So you want to look for the good in the situation at the right time. If you've been fired from your job or you get cancer and someone says, oh, at least you'll get a big lesson from having cancer, you're going to want to cuff them in the face, proverbially. So it is about the timing of when we do that, of when we see the good, you know? And yeah, you know, one thing a question I like to ask people to get them, you know, it's very simple, and yet what it does is it can help you prioritize your work. It can help you resolve change quickly. And the question I like to give people is, what challenges can you resolve quickly if you thought about them differently?
Okay.
So think about that. What challenges can you resolve quickly if you thought about them differently?
Mm-hmm.
So which ones would you think about? So, because the reason I say that is we get stuck in our mental models of what we can and cannot do. You know, self-imposed limitations are the biggest barrier to change.
Yeah.
You know, and if we want a bigger future, we have to create a bigger thinking around what the future looks like. Right. And, you know, when we think about, sometimes we need someone to say to us, you know, if you just thought about this differently. Yeah. And then all of a sudden your thinking expands.
Yeah. One of I don't, if you've seen the 4 questions from NLP, there's like, what would happen if you had the problem? What wouldn't happen if you had the problem? What would happen if you didn't have the problem? And then the last one, which is mind-blowing, is what wouldn't happen if you didn't have the problem? And that what wouldn't happen if you didn't have the problem,
right? It
just blows the boundaries out of, like, if you got yourself stuck in sort of a box of what wouldn't happen if you didn't have the problem, and then you're sitting there and then you're like, what was my problem in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it's like blowing out those boundaries, because you're right. Like, I think, you know, there are days that I feel like I got this, I can do this, and then there's other days when I'm like, who the hell's ever gonna, like, why would anybody ever listen to me?
Well, I think
scale of different days, those different days that you feel empowered, and there's different days where you just feel like, oh, I'm nothing. And I just learned recently there's that imposter syndrome has a name called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I've
heard of that, yes.
Yeah, I think I heard about it on Vince Mirabelli's podcast, that they were talking about that. I'm like, Freddy Krueger effect? What is, I don't want that, whatever that is.
Well, you know, I think it's really about those self-imposed limitations. What happens is, you know, we create them, and it's hard for people to get through it. So if we're going to change the way we think about looking at challenges, you know, if I go with everything I'm working on that's a challenge, what could I get the biggest result if I just shifted my thinking and got a different viewpoint? So there's that. The other question you can ask is, you know, what have people told me is a limitation that is actually could be a strength?
That's so true. And have you heard of the wabi-sabi? Have you heard of wabi-sabi?
No.
Because that is so true, Greg. I came across this this term a few years ago called wabi-sabi, which, from what I understand, is this Japanese art form, which is finding the beauty in imperfection. And so for the same things that I beat myself up for, every single time I get off stage, every single time, it's like, I talk too quickly, I talk too much, blah, blah, blah. And yet that's what makes me me. So the imperfections is what makes me me. So if I look at it from a different perspective, then I just have to accept my imperfections, because that's
well, yeah. And, there's an and to that. And we also need to think about how can other people hear me more effectively and balance that out. So, as an example for me, when I was a kid, it's not going to surprise anybody who knows me that's listening, that I talk too much. I was told I talk too much in class. My parents told me I talk too much, or I talk too much. Guess what? I'm paid to talk now. Mm-hmm. And yet my perennial life lesson is shut up and listen. So while my limitation was talking, and I'm glad that it is a strength, it is balancing that out and realizing that other people need space. And not just to say, and I know you didn't mean it this way, but I've certainly used it in the past with me, like, oh, I'm just like this, so it's okay. Well, yes, it is okay. And if you want to work with other people, we have to make it okay for them somehow. Mm-hmm. So I think there's like a balance.
Without beating ourselves up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And using the and instead of the or, because you can kind of be both.
And get rid of the but.
Yeah,
take the words but out of your vocabulary, because most of the time we use them and they don't make sense.
The only time I think what I was in NLP is when you use but and the ending is positive. So if you're using
if the negative has to be before the but for it to be good to use. But it's also meant to show contrast. So if you're like, you're really good at this, but you need to improve on this, that's not effective use. You're really good at this and you need to improve in it, because but weighs what's after it more than what's before.
100%. That is like one of my, I'm always thinking about that in my head. When am I using that word but? Am I leaving somebody with a positive experience, or am I trying to bring them down? And then I have to sort of reframe it if people don't know that trick, that when they say it, they're not necessarily trying to make me feel bad about myself.
Well, I educate them, and I just say, let's take the word but of our vocabulary and use the word and. Because if you say, yes, I can do that, but, it means no.
Absolutely.
So let's be honest with our language. Yes, I can do that, and this is what the impact is.
Yeah, and use that to ourselves, too, because I even heard myself use the word try. And that's another no-no in the NLP.
Well, I think I don't beat myself up about some things like that, but it's, I think it's okay if there's certain pieces of language you want to remove.
Yeah. So when I've got some of these questions written down here, and
Go ahead.
So have you ever, what are some of the things that maybe you've struggled with, and how did you overcome them? Is it the sort of the same principles that we covered that already, about how you just reframe things in your own brain for things that you
No, I still struggle with what are people going to think of me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be on it. I'm taping a television show, reality TV show called The Social Movement in June. And I had to, sit on it while I was figuring out the agreement with them and stuff like that. And, when I posted, I thought, oh, is this bragging? What are people going to think? And, I still have that, whether it's about being on television, whether it's about, is it too much when people say I've worked with audiences from the UN or NATO, stuff like this. And like, what are people going to think? And, blah, blah, blah. And yet there's a reality that most of us need to get out of those stories that we tell ourselves. I spoke many years ago at a conference, and it was called something like The Stories We Tell Ourselves. I did something about that, a little 15, 20-minute opening keynote. And, we have experiences that determine, our whole life is spent stepping out and stepping back. Let me give you an example. When I was a kid, I remember up until I was about the age of 6 years old, I was like, really happy, fun kid, good family life. And then I went to school. I think it was kindergarten. We'd already done daycare by that point. And I remember some kid called me a name, and I shrank behind the wall. And I'm like, I could probably guess the name that he did, but I honestly don't remember what name it was. But I shrank behind the wall. And then, I stepped out a little bit. And then, I just sort of remember, and everybody goes through this, whether that happened to them as a kid or not, where we step out a little bit, whether we're kids, and we're told, shut up, don't do that. Or, do this, don't do that. And we step out constantly, and then we go back. And then when we age and go to work, we're in meetings. We bring up an idea. Yeah, I don't think it's going to work here. So we step back in and someone made us feel stupid. So we don't. So we spend our whole life stepping in and it's all based upon the stories that we tell ourselves. And there's a great quote that's often attributed to Nelson Mandela, but is actually Marianne Williamson. Very old quote, but sometimes I use it because has a good point, which it's something to the effect of, I'm going to paraphrase because I can't quite remember it. It says, who are we not to be talented, gorgeous, and fabulous? Who are you not to be? There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so others won't feel insecure. Because at the end of the day, and I know this, I worked in palliative care for many years and went through many people end of life back in the 90s, that at the end of the day, it's not about we didn't have Facebook back then, but it's not about how many likes you have. It's not about how many New York Times bestsellers you've written. It's not about how much work you've done. It's about, is my family okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are my people okay that I love?
Yeah.
Is my, are my kids okay? I would say, is my cat okay? That's what's valuable. And so with this, back to the TV show, I really had to go, how many opportunities do you get this in your lifetime to do something like this? So you can be afraid that other people are going to think you're egocentric and being on a show, and the TV show might make you look stupid, or, you know what? Who gets to do this? So why would I not do it?
Of course, and I think the huge aha that I had years ago when I did the first time I had to speak in front, and it was it was a really personal story about when I had my identity stolen and someone pretended to be me, went onto a competitor's website and wrote, "Dear Anne, you're nothing but a hack and a money grubbing pig," signed Leslie Hughes.
That's harsh. That's harsh self-talk.
It was crazy. So long story short was then I got to go onto this stage and tell that story, and I was so nervous. I only had 10 minutes to actually tell my story. I was done in 5. And I realized afterwards when I watched that video back, I thought, oh my heart felt like I was pounding out of my chest, and nobody else could tell.
No.
That I was freaking out. Same thing like being on the social. I was like an out of body experience because I was so focused on the questions and was I looking in the right place? Was I engaging? And so I was like, it was an out of body experience. I have no idea what I said, but I liken it to almost like when I jumped out of an airplane. And so terrifying, you jump out, but then as soon as you land, you go, I want to do that again. It was thrilling. It was so exciting. I loved it. And I think of anytime I do something that's scary, I think of the outcome of this is probably going to be more fun than the fear I have going into it. Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome.
It's something, again, we work on all the time. And one of the other quotes that I love in your book, and I think it's sort of paraphrased from The Wizard of Oz, is you have it in you all along. Right? There's I circled it.
Oh, you know what? It's not from The Wizard of Oz. This is it's me. I say there's a power within us that we don't know we have. And when we access that power, we can create great change on the planet. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Well, I kind of was thinking about it along the lines of, I think you said it much more succinctly.
Oh.
And it's
Was it the wizard or something?
Well, in The Wizard of Oz, it's just the same sort of metaphor is you do have the power in you all along. And most of the time we don't necessarily recognize that the power within us is actually stronger than we think it's going to be.
It is. And we are better than we know.
Yeah.
We are better than we know.
We are, and Amy's saying it was Glinda the Good Witch.
Oh, good.
Yes, it was one of my favorite trips to go to Washington. When I saw you in Washington, and Hans and I went to.
It was 5 years ago.
Was it 5 years ago?
Yeah,
right?
5 years ago.
Oh my! No, it couldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
Was it? Hans and I got to.
It was before 2016. I can tell you that.
Really? Because
Mhm.
Hans Ekman and I got to go, he was my tour guide in Washington, and we went to the Smithsonian, and I got to see the ruby slippers. And I
Yes.
almost like broke down and cried because that was my favorite movie growing up when I was a
Yeah.
little kid, was always like, I envisioned myself as some sort of Dorothy. And those ruby slippers were everything. And then, of course, going on an adventure with Hans, there's nothing like it having Hans as your tour guide in Washington, because he was like, not only telling me, really interesting anecdotes about things that I didn't know about, but sometimes throwing a little jab in there of saying things that I thought he messed with my brain on a couple of occasions.
That's great.
So like when it comes to you, I mean, you're very active online. So what do you think are some of the mistakes people are making online? And are there ways that people can sort of mitigate those mistakes ahead of time? What do you think what do you think about that?
My number one don't that I just happened to me today online, and it happens regularly. If you want to connect with me, don't try to sell me something. They all went to some stupid LinkedIn course, I'm sure, that said, when you connect with someone, offer to have a meeting and sell them on something. Well, it's the number one way for me to delete you immediately. And I do that. If you friend me on LinkedIn or become a follower or connection, and you try to sell me something, and I don't care if it's real estate, finances, no, I will be like, thanks, but no, and I delete that connection. I don't block them, but I will delete them. So sell, do not do that.
No, we
Let
wouldn't
your,
be face to face. I wouldn't walk up to you and be like, "Hey, Greg, you want to buy my stuff?" You'd be
no,
like,
and that's a great tip in your book that I remember reading last time I read it, which was a while ago, which is, you don't do everything online you would not do in person. I know you say that. I've heard you say that.
Yeah.
And I hate that sell. Or the other way is the soft sell, which is like, oh, I really want to find out what you do. Let's have a 15-minute conversation. I'm like, I don't have time. I don't care. And you know what? Follow me. I'll follow you. If I need you, I'll reach out. If you need me, reach out to me.
Right. Yeah.
It's very much I think the most important thing for people to realize online is it's an opportunity for you to take a point of view. And I think it's very important to have a point of view about a topic. And, my point of view is very clear, which is change is not out there. It starts with us, and that is very clearly my point of view. And if you don't like it, you don't need to engage in my stuff. And I'm cool with that. If you want to focus on change management planning and how to do change control processes and all that stuff, which I've taught, fine. And more power to you, because that's not where I work. My point of view is very much starts with your brain, starts with your physiology, then you can take it out. And it's not being afraid to have a point of view. And it's about having a point of view that's current. So it can't be tone deaf. So if I was putting stuff out there like, change and resilience is really good, and we all have to deal with stuff like that, people are like, donut head, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's like it needs to be anchored in, we're all going through dealing with the pandemic on the planet now, so based on that, what is current that I have to say that's a point of view related to that?
Yeah. Well, and like one of the worst things I used to hear, especially when I used to work at a wedding magazine, and as we know, with social media, print, like a lot of traditional ways of communicating through media has eroded. And I just remember at the time, my boss, who was a lovely woman, just kept saying, like, don't talk about the web because it's going to cannibalize print. And, like, it's happening anyway. So her mindset was always like, don't change. Don't, let's, like, it's almost like those people, those naysayers out there in the business world, when you say something and they go, yeah, we already tried that. We already tried that. And like, how productive is that when they go, yeah, no, we got to shut that down because we already tried that. But they don't necessarily think about, did you try it from this perspective? Or
they'll be, I used to do this. New ideas would come up in meetings. I'd be like, that's not going to work. I've been here 11 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And my staff that I shouldn't say my staff, the people I was working with would, prove me wrong. And I'm glad they did many times.
Because that's tough. I think to your point, like most of us, when we do raise our hand and we say we have an idea and then someone shoots us down, it just makes us less likely to raise our hand the next time to say something.
Well, and it's because people don't know what idea generation is. No one sits around a table and brings up a fully formed idea.
Mm,
Nobody does.
true. Yeah.
No idea is fully formed when it comes up in a group setting. I've seen tons of research on that. There's tons of books on idea generation related to that. People bring up ideas that might be 5% formed, 10% formed, 30% formed, but your 5% needs to collide with my 5% that needs to collide with Hans's and Amy's. And then all of a sudden, 5 plus 5 plus 5 becomes 225 because it creates the synergy of something bigger than itself. And that's that. When you do that, what I call, I just released a little video on that ping pong ball of ideas coming out, and I used to speak about that at conferences a lot. Is that you don't get innovation. The future of work is all about being innovative, and how do we take and people have been more innovative than they thought. I wrote an article on 6 change management myths about 4 months into the pandemic, because there's so many myths. Change takes a lot of time, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's crap. Most organizations went virtual within 3 weeks. Yet if I'd sat down with them 2 years ago and said, let's make your organization virtual, it would have taken a year to plan and a year to implement. We're much more change ready than we think, much more. And this pandemic has proved it.
Yeah. And so, how we met was through these project management courses,
Yes.
project management conferences. Do you think that project managers, some of them that I've met have a tendency of they have to figure out they have to kind of be the naysayers of why this isn't going to work. Do you find that with that particular industry, or am I just?
I'm going to say no, because I think there's many different types of project managers. There's ones that are very focused on, the plan and the deliverables, or other ones that are very focused on roping the people in. So I think that it's just like with BAs, there's a range of business analysts. And I think it's, BA's, overall functions to ensure the product's aligning with requirements and so on. Yet I can tell you there are many BAs that, are influencing people constantly to do things differently, and that are engaging teams. And same with some PMs become very focused on the plan, whereas others are out there focusing on, implementation. So, I think pointing out risks of something is part of being a good strategic thinker. I think how you do it will make or break your effectiveness.
Yeah, well, that's really good. Because I do hear a lot of leaders, especially the ones that I am writing their LinkedIn profile for, and they'll say, well, I'm an innovator, I'm a change maker, I'm a blah, 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 blah.
We all are.
And it's a little bit of a platitude, and sometimes I start a little bit of saying, like, okay, so tell me how, because I find that the same thing applies for almost everybody's LinkedIn profile. Insofar as I love to help you, like, tell me your why. Let the Simon Sinek start with why. Tell me your why. Well, I love to help people. I love to help people change. I like to help, and it's sometimes I have to like draw it out of them a little bit more insofar as, well, give me some specific details about what you've done.
Totally. And it's so great that you're doing that with your work, because people need that. Even me, we redid my website about a year ago in the middle of the pandemic. Before the pandemic started, we were in process. And then, we had to do it again 6 months later as my thinking evolved. And I was like, this is really too loose. It needs to be more specific. I need to step into this, talk about it more clearly. And, there is value in having someone like you being able to say, because we're all change makers, we're all this, we're all that, but it's more about, everybody's a good communicator. Like, no one's going to hire you because you say you're a good communicator and can use Microsoft Word. Everybody can do that. So what is that unique differentiator that you bring to the planet? First Nations folks have what they call your original medicine, which is, what is that unique piece that you were born to do on the planet and contribute? And what is that medicine? And if you don't express it, it will be lost to the world forever. My medicine's made up of humor and research and fun and practical tips. And, my medicine is very much, that's what I bring to the planet. And I bring it in a way that is my journey, which my journey is all about breaking through limitations and creating positive change in the world, because that's been my journey my whole life, ever since that little kid. And yet how to do that in a way that makes sense and articulate that in a way that is business savvy. And that's what the value is that you bring, I think.
Yeah, and I think that what I've learned too is that what I help people do, I'm not necessarily building a better mousetrap. All I'm doing is eliciting responses that people go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Because what I do is end up mirroring back to them. I ask the questions. They tell me I do this, this, and this, and this, and then I mirror it back to them, and they go, wow, I feel pretty good about myself. Because sometimes most of us haven't asked ourselves those questions. Like we haven't one of the biggest questions I'll ask my clients is, what are your biggest accomplishments, your proudest moments? And that's when they take a beat. And they go, I never really thought about that.
And I think, when I'm working with, young entrepreneurs as an example, I get that. I say, go talk to your friends and family, ask them what they like about you and what your strength is and what you bring to the table, and see what that theme is. Because if you really want to bring your full self to work, you cannot switch off the way you are at home to the way you are at work. And yes, you have to put on a professional veneer and do all that stuff, and you can't swear and whatever. I like to swear, so I can't do that obviously on stage. So there are stuff you have to adjust. Yeah. Yet you still want to be able to bring your full self to whatever work you're doing, and you want to be able to identify that and articulate it in ways in your LinkedIn profile that makes sense to people. I don't like this stuff, and this is just me personally, when people have, job titles, and some people are going to yell at me for saying this. I apologize to anybody listening. This is just my own personal experience. I hate when people have a good job title and then they make it something I have no idea what it is.
Like Chief Happiness Officer.
I'm like the chief communication enabler. Like, I don't know what that is, and neither does anybody else. So if it's a culture in the job,
it is, right? They know that again. They know what it is, but nobody else can figure that out. Yeah. What does a chief happiness officer do? Do you run around with like a little magic wand and say like, and you're happy, and I don't know, but I see these things too, and I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me. No. Yeah. So we're kind of getting down to the last few minutes here. I guess I got 2 questions. If you had a career do-over, would you change anything? Do you think you would change anything?
Oh, I have tons of things I would change. I didn't want to go through. From speaking at events I should have said no to that's probably a big one, and now I do say no. Is speaking at events that I should have said no to, and there was a lesson in it, but I didn't really need that lesson, didn't want to do it, which was say no. Working for people I necessarily didn't want to work for 30 years ago. There's a few things. I did get fired from one of my jobs when I was 17 at an ice cream store because I was trying to make them more efficient because I'm a good project manager. They weren't scooping ice cream properly, and I got fired. So there are a few things, and yes, you can take a cosmic view and say, yes, it shaped me and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I don't want to go through bad experiences as anybody else.
Well, I think to your point too, the times when I've been asked, and we as speakers, we get asked all the time, will you come and speak for free? Yep. And I very, very rarely will, because that's a part of my business model. I'm sure it is part of yours.
Are you a nonprofit?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But you'll get exposure, Greg. You'll get exposure. And I've learned to be diplomatic about saying, well, thanks, but no thanks, because that's even I said, like, listen, I'll go to the opening of an envelope if you just throw a few bucks my way. It's about the value, right? It's about the value that I'm bringing, and also the reframe. And I hope if anybody's listening to this too, is like when some people go, how much does it cost for what you do? And I go, well, you're not just paying for my hourly rate, you're paying for the value that I'm giving you, right? And I'm sure that's exactly what you know.
Well, I do donate my time. I do donate my time to women's shelters and stuff like that. I've spoken tons at men's and women's shelters over the years, in front of homeless people and people living on the street. I did that all for free, of course. I still do. But most places, if they have people that are employed there making a salary, then I deserve some cash too.
Yeah, and I think it's standing in your value and recognizing that you're bringing value to them, and and most organizations, I think it's a little bit cheeky of them to expect that you're going to feel like you're going to get exposure from it, right? When we're all media agencies, there's nothing like like what you and I are doing right now,
No.
Yeah. So any last words, any last words other than, we're going to talk about, as we sign off, we're going to talk about the social movement, if there's anything else more to share with that. But any last words before we sort of wrap
Well,
up?
I think the biggest thing is not to get overwhelmed with all the changes that are going on in the planet, the changes that you want to make in your career, the changes you want to make with your LinkedIn profile. Do something small, because one of the things that I know, and this comes from, years of speaking to and certainly the last 10 years speaking to thousands and thousands of people, is that it's really, the magic of daily changes that's going to make the biggest difference in the quality of your life. Because how you start your day is how you lead your day. And make no mistake, you do lead your day. And how you lead your day is how you live your life. And so it comes back to those moments, our day-to-day interactions with others.
And it's
So
kind of
thank you
like,
so much for having me.
yeah, I'm so glad. And it's kind of like that Indiana Jones thing where if I'm sure if he looked upon all his, like he reverse engineered all the steps that he got to before he took
Yeah.
that leap, it would have definitely been, he took a very solid step every step of the way until he had to take the big leap. So,
And we'll let the BAs do that reverse engineering. I will not do that. I don't have the patience.
so tell us a little bit about the social movement. Can you share anything about that, or can you?
Yeah, so people can follow on Instagram if they're interested in that. I go down to film in Miami. It's teams of people we've got kids on our team, and we are solving big world problems, like coming up with a business plan that we pitch to get real funding for, to solve issues like poverty, economic inequality, gender inequality, cancer, stuff like that. So I'm really excited. It's sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. And, I love working with organizations that want to make the planet a better place. So this seemed like a really fun experience to meet like-minded people to do it.
Amazing.
So yeah.
So when is that launched? Do you know when that
So,
launches?
so season 1 was postponed airing, but it's airing Labor Day weekend. And I'm going to be in season 2, which we're supposed to film everything, COVID-y, in June in Miami, and which will be aired in Earth Day 2022.
Oh, that is so cool. Oh my gosh.
So people follow me at Gregg Brown, GreggBrownTO for Toronto, Ontario, Gregg Brown TO. I'll have updates there.
And you also do virtual talks, so
Do
obviously
lots of virtual talks.
you
Yeah.
had to pivot with the that's a big word, this with the
I
pandemic.
do not use that word pivot. I hate it more than anything. I do. So it's like I kept waiting for the term flatten the curve to become the business lexicon. So it has not. So I say shift, and that's just me because I talk about shifting mindset. So I was lucky I had clients that already did virtual. So it was a very easy transition. But yeah, I'm very fortunate I get to speak with people all over the planet now, like in Kenya and Uzbekistan. I've had people from all over the world on my sessions, and I get to learn a lot and have a lot of fun. So
That's amazing. You must have to get up in the middle of the night sometimes to actually do a keynote.
I have, well, I'm lucky. It's usually a 12-hour time difference in the big places, and usually people will log on from everywhere else. So usually conferences are sort of the African, European or North American, and then people come in from everywhere. So
That's amazing.
I'm
So
very fortunate.
you said it already. So oh, here's your web. I was like, where's your website on here? So it is GreggBrown.ca is your website.
Yep. Or go to bechangeready.com. Bechangeready.com goes right to there. So it's much easier to remember. So bechangeready.com. Reach out to me there. There's lots of resources, videos. And my YouTube is GBTV. So people can go there and get some videos and some tips and all interviews and all that hoo-ha.
Smart branding.
Thank you.
Well, I know that Gregg and I both want to hear from anybody who's watched today or anybody who's watched in the future if you're watching the recording. So please share with us on whichever channel you want to the biggest takeaway, the biggest aha. I know I have received a couple of ahas already, and I'm going to rewatch this because I know my mind was blown on some of those amazing tips.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I hope that everybody else will sort of jump in and give us your feedback as well.
Please.
And yeah, so thank you so much, Gregg, for chatting with me. And next Wednesday, back at 2 o'clock again, I'm going to be talking with my buddy Adam Smith. And Adam is the co-founder of a company called Tension. And so I've worked with Adam I worked with him 20 years ago at a .com.
Wow.
Believe it. And so he's an expert in user experience of building websites that are intuitive and that are smart and that are designed properly. And so we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk, and he's worked with companies like Rogers Communications, PwC, CBC, and the Hospital for Sick Kids. And we're going to talk about branding then too. So
wow.
looking forward to talking with my friend Adam next week. So
Sounds like a fun job you have, Miss Leslie.
Well, it's because of people, I've got these amazing people that I can interview, and it was Hans
Thank
Ekman
you.
that encouraged me to do this. So thank you sort of for raising your hand and asking me to speak
Of course.
because, yeah, like you're number three. So you're my fancy number three.
Fancy number 3. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. And we'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Bye.
Okay.